What is up, y'all? It is your girl Jice, and we are back with another episode of Boss Up with BBI. So, y'all know what time it is. I want you to stop what you're doing, like, subscribe, share, push out this information. I'm going to talk today about a pretty important topic. I'm going to talk a lot about networking. And I don't want this to be a very nuanced conversation. I want to really dig into why it is so important for us as a Black community to really grow out our networks and really build our networks locally, nationally, globally. We have to work together, and we start by really building strong networks and strong infrastructure that way. So, y'all already know that I'm going to dig on in. I'm going to get right to it. But first, I want to say that this episode is sponsored by our Mentor Me Mastermind program. And I'm so excited because it launched yesterday. And so it was absolutely fabulous. Like, I really can't say enough about it. And so we have some amazing superstar businesses that are going to be growing and building their business. So you will learn more about them as we continue to grow and build. But I'm just really excited. I actually can't wait to introduce you to all of them. So that is where we are at. All right. I want to talk about networking. And I just want to dig into this because, we have this idea about our network being our net worth. And that is really true. But I think at times it feels, again, just really nuanced. Like, what does that actually mean? So if you hear that your network is your net worth, and that doesn't necessarily resonate with you, and that doesn't really mean anything to you, first, let's kind of classify net worth in the sense of your net worth is your wealth, right? And so the actual sense of net worth is what your assets, or what you have, minus your liabilities, and then that gives you your net worth. So your network isn't your actual net worth, but it really helps to build your net worth. And so it helps to build on the asset side. So, or let me throw this out there. On the liability side, your network could be that, right? If you are known for hanging out with, those who ain't about nothing, those who ain't doing nothing, if you have a lot of controversial people that are in your network, all of those types of things. And I feel like that didn't even come out right. It's not if you have a lot of controversial people, but it's just like how you're viewed, right? And so if you are viewed in a positive light and your network is full of really, diverse group of people and places and industries and yada, 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 then, that really contributes to your asset side. At the same time, your network can contribute to your liability side. So the people that you hang out with, if you are hanging out with the wrong crowd by association, that can also be detrimental to your career or to your ability to grow, and so on and so forth. So you have to be intentional in thinking about your network. And what I have found is that either a lot of people either don't really understand what that means, and that's why I want to take a moment to explain it, or maybe they do, but they haven't really embraced what that means to them in their business, in their quest for wealth, and in their quest to grow, and in their quest to build a business, and really in their quest for anything, right? So, I want to spend some time digging into that and hopefully getting us to get to a place where we're embracing that as a community, right? So not necessarily an individual. You might be an individual and you've got it, but what I've noticed, and part of the reason I want to address this, is because I see it all the time. Like, I see people who, when they say like, I don't have anybody, or I don't know anybody, or I'm not able to move forward in that direction because I don't have anyone who can help me grow me, build me, hold my hand, make the right introductions, get me that discount, right? And so what you find is that, like, if you're a person who's always paying full price, if you're a person who is, never able to call on anyone, if you're a person who no one ever calls on you, or if you're a person who who everyone always calls on you, but you never feel like you can call on anyone else, right? It's like you have to assess your network. So I feel like throughout my experiences, I see a lot of it. I see it all the time. And I really wanted to address it because again, and I guess as I started laying out like the episodes for the podcast for this year, I started kind of thinking in like a building mode, right? How do we think about vision? How do we think about ourselves? How do we think about, our ability to move forward in whatever it is that our vision is? And so kind of wanting to lay in some foundational pieces, especially as I start to dig into some of the guests that I have and that I want to bring on to some of the other in-depth topics. It's like, how do we build a solid foundation? And I really feel like you can't have a solid foundation in wealth building without building a network. And so oftentimes, as you listen to people who have become successful, or you think about where they are in their journey, and you'll listen to who made an introduction to who, or somebody, took them on this road, or somebody believed in them. And ultimately what they're telling you is that they had a strong network and their network helped them get where they are. So, all right. So that's enough with that. I just want to, I want to dig into that. And I just want to explain why it's important, because I feel like talking about networking is just not a sexy topic. And we've had a couple of those, already with like not necessarily having the sexy topic. But when I think about foundational work, it's just not always sexy. Like we want to get to the top. We want the keys. We want the answers, but we don't have a strong foundation. And when we don't have that strong foundation, it makes whatever you build on it really weak. So, this podcast is all about money and mindset in the Black community. And I don't want us to have a weak foundation. Okay, so I digress. So think about your network. Think about your network. How often are you called in? And how often are you able to call out? Those things equal value. So first, what I mean by how often are you called in, meaning how often are people calling on you when they need something, whether they need an introduction to someone, if they need a contact, if they need a job, if they need a referral, if they need a testimonial, who knows what it could be, right? But my question is, how often are you called in? So, sorry for everyone who can see me because I thought my phone was on do not disturb. How often are you called in? And then the other question to ask yourself is, how often are you able to call out? So first, let me backtrack though. If you are someone who is never being called in on, meaning no one ever really reaches out to you and ask you for a favor that requires you to dig into your network or host of resources. So like, not a favor like, can you come over and help me move? Not a favor like, can you watch my kids? But more along the lines of, who do you know? Can you introduce me to this person? Can you help me, can you give me a recommendation over here? If I, does your word or does your weight or does the weight of your reputation hold up if I use your name over here, right? So if no one calls on you in that way, where your name, the goodwill of your name or your brand or like what you've built up for yourself in terms of your reputation can't be used in an exchange for value, you need to work on that for yourself, because that means that you don't provide value to another person. And so then in return, why should someone provide value to you? So I'm going to get into that because we basically call that quid pro quo. And that's exactly what networking is. And we need to be comfortable with that. But I'm going to come back to that because I think that quid pro quo kind of gets like a negative, overtone or whatever. So anyway, so think about how often you're called in. If you're never called in, just make a note of that, because that's something that you need to work on. That means you need to work on upping your value to other people so that you become someone that can be called in on. Then the other side of that is, how often are you able to call out? So when you need something, are you able to pick up the phone or open up your email and then reach out to someone and ask them to make a key introduction, to help you out, to partner, to yada, 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 right? So all those things that we just talked about. Are you able to do that? And again, if you're not able to do that, and if you feel like you can't call on anyone, then I would suggest that you haven't worked on building out your network. So, what it all boils down to is value. Are you seen as a valuable resource, or do you have access to valuable resources? So, again, equating, if you are called in, if that means that people can call you, you are seen as a valuable resource. If you're able to call out, meaning you have access to valuable resources. So that's really what it's all about. And so, again, thinking about one of the things that we need inside of our community, we need to be resources to each other, and we need to have access to resources. And that is essentially the importance of your network, right? Because resources are assets. So again, your network is your net worth. I hope for somebody I'm connecting these dots. All right. So I just want to kind of share a couple of maybe like quick stories to kind of pull in some of these strategies. And then I'm going to basically give you a couple of my networking tips. But first, I want to make sure that we are sharing some definitions. So I've talked about networking, but I really want to break it down in terms of a definition. So networking, by definition, by my definition, by the definition that I use, I'm like, you always got to be careful with what you say, right? Like, I did not make up this definition, but this is the definition that I subscribe to in networking. There we go. And I don't know if it's a Webster definition or not. So y'all rock with me. Okay. Networking, the definition of networking as Jice sees it, the process of developing and maintaining relationships that are mutually beneficial. So again, I said quid pro quo, right? So the process of developing and maintaining relationships that are mutually beneficial. So first you have to actually develop them, and then they have to be maintained. And you can think about that in all different types of ways, because you shouldn't be stressed out by the notion of maintaining relationships. Have you ever had that good friend where like you don't have to talk to them all the time, but when you do, it's fabulous. You catch up, it's like it's old times, right? And so when you've built strong networks, you shouldn't be stressed out by the process of maintaining them. A lot of your day-to-day focuses and tasks should be on what it is that you are building, what it is that you are doing, but being intentional to keep up with some of the people who you have met, developing out those relationships, and kind of seeing how all that, ties in together. So I'll, again, follow up on that, but develop and maintain relationships that are mutually beneficial. So again, making sure that we address the idea that this is like quid pro quo. So the other definition that I want to put out there is what a resource is, right? So I mentioned already that either you are seen as a valuable resource or you have access to valuable resources. And in an ideal world, you are both, because again, we're maintaining mutually beneficial relationships. So you may be a resource to someone may be a resource to you. You should be a combination of both. But what is a resource? So a resource is an asset or a source that you can use that produces a benefit or has utility. So again, pointing out, when we talk about your network being your net work being your net worth, it is asset based, right? You are being a resource, or you have access to resources that falls in on your asset side, and it's something that you can use to produce a benefit or has some purpose or utility. So I just want to acknowledge that, because most or many networks are designed to be win-win. So thus they are quid pro quo, right? So they are something for something. But the value doesn't always have to be equal. It doesn't have to be apples for apples. It can be apples for computers. It can be, oranges for tea. It could be tea for books, right? It doesn't have to be an equal exchange, and it doesn't always have to happen at that time. So for example, you can, call your network and say, hey, I need this, and they will come through for you. And they might not need anything from you for years, right? But when they do come back around, it's like, hey, remember a couple years ago when I did XYZ? So I need to call in that favor now, because I need for you to do ABC, right? So when you're going through that, just recognize that it might not always be an equal exchange for exchange, and it doesn't always have to be done at the time of the initial exchange. So, and I want to acknowledge that, because what I also see oftentimes in young networkers is this need to like fulfill a need for somebody else. So if someone helps you, you feel so guilty about them helping you, like, oh my God, I can't believe I need to do something for them. But you don't necessarily need to do something for them. You just need to remember that they did something for you. The other side about that is people who just come in and they're takers. And so it's like they just use and use and use and use and use, and they never have anything to give back. They're not valuable in that way. They don't develop themselves to be of value. So therefore, when someone else is like, hey, remember that time? They're like, yeah, but, or I can't really do that right now. And so what happens is that's also why you find that they don't develop those strong relationships, because at some point, no one is really willing to go to bat for them. That might be you. I don't know. Assess yourself. But just acknowledge that it's really like, one, you should just never be a taker. Like, that's just not, forget networking. That's just not a good person to just always taking, right? But on the other side, like begin to learn or get comfortable with acknowledging that you don't just have to immediately return a favor to somebody. And this is something that I heard and was, I don't want to say disturbing is not the right word. And I'll be honest to say, I will acknowledge to say that this is not a regular sentiment that I've heard, but I have heard this. Like, I don't want anything hanging over my head, right? So like, I don't want to owe someone. And y'all, I just gotta say, we have to get out of mentalities like that, especially in the business world, but just in general, as we think about how we show up in the world. This is a global society, right? And you have to start operating. We have to think as a Black community how to start operating from a place of leverage. And when you're constantly thinking like, I don't want to owe anybody anything, and I hear that in so many places. I don't even want to segue, because now what I'm actually going to do is just make myself a note to talk about that in another thing. I don't want to segue from that, but I hear that sentiment. Now that I'm saying it out loud, it's not always in the networking space that I hear it, but I hear that sentiment of like, I don't want to owe something, or I don't want to owe somebody, in a lot of business settings, when it comes to dealing with the money, when it comes to dealing with our finances, and even understanding how the assets work. And I really feel like that's a biblical principle that we take incorrectly. So I'm just going to write that down right now in the middle of this whole podcast. Give me 1 second. Give me the do. Okay. Thank you for that. I needed that. So, yeah, because that's not necessarily something that I always hear in the networking space, but it still applies, because you have people who are like, well, they did a favor for me, so I need to just do something for them, or I need to figure out how to get that off my back because I don't want to owe them nothing, right? And so then it doesn't really build up your network. It's like giving someone a present who has everything, you know what I mean, at a time that's like inappropriate. It's like, it doesn't help your cause any. So, and you did it just because you were just like, I don't want to have to give you a present later, so let me just give this to you now. It was completely an inappropriate time, so it did nothing for them. And at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything for you. It makes you look kind of unprofessional or whatever. So anyway, we'll get into that. So anyway, all right, I want to just jump into like a couple of stories, but I wanted to kind of set the basis for that, because if you follow this podcast, which you should be, so if you aren't, follow it. But if you follow this podcast, you'll know that I don't like to talk in the assumption that everyone knows what we're talking about. We are here to educate. I am here to educate. And as long as we're doing that, I don't want to assume that everyone knows or understands what a network is, or what a resource is, or even what quid pro quo means, because I'm using that phrase and maybe that doesn't mean anything to you. So I want to talk about that. I don't want to assume that you know what your net worth is, right? So I always like to go through that, and I like to iterate that, because as the podcast continues to grow, I want new people coming in to know that, like, I want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So I do kind of go down to this like 101 level so that we can elevate up to, the next level, right? All right, so I just wanted to give you this story and just kind of talk about how like networking happens. So there's a young lady who I think is fabulous, and I'm going to have her on the podcast. I'm not going to talk about what her name is right now, but if she's listening, she knows who she is. So she's fabulous, and I met her. So I went to a luncheon. Now, networking. Okay, so I was invited to this luncheon to sit at someone's table, and she also happened to be at that table. I don't know how she got there, don't know what her connection was or anything. Just so happened that I was seated next to her at this table that I was invited to. So we're at this luncheon, and then what do you know? She is announced as the next speaker. So she gets up, and I'm like, oh, all right, sis, I see you. You know, she's young like me. I think I'm like a couple of years older than her, but really not by much. And so I'm looking like, okay, girlfriend, go ahead, right? So she gets up there, and she was phenomenal. I was like, oh, right. So I'm listening, I'm soaking in everything. And then I'm super excited because you know what? She's coming to sit back right next to me. First of all, me being there was a part of my network. Okay, so then afterwards, of course, everyone is coming up to her, but luckily for me, I was sitting right next to her, so I was able to just kind of snack her real quick, like, hey, girlfriend, I know everyone is going to come up and talk to you, but I would love to connect with you. Can I get your information? So she hands me her card. She's like, yes, I would love to talk to you. So we go our separate ways. It took me a while to get back to her. It took us time to connect. But then when we did, it felt really good, you know? And so it was this kind of like yin and yang. Like you see me, how I talk, I'm like in your face. This is what it is. I talk, you know, like that, right? She has a more like relaxed tone. Her words are just as impactful, but her demeanor and the way that she delivers is just more calm. So it was this like interesting exchange of like, yeah. And she's like, yeah. So it was fabulous, right? It's like a little girl crush. I love her. Okay. So anyway, so that happened about 2 years ago. And so we've just been following up. So then I asked her to come and be a speaker at my summit. And I introduced her to the keynote speaker that I had brought from Atlanta. Shout out to Suresh May. So I had brought him out from Atlanta. So I introduced her to him. They are still in connection, right? So that was like a great network for her. So she has another connection in Atlanta. And then I asked her again to come and speak for me at my summit this past year in 2019. So this is like all going on in that process. So in this year's summit, I then introduced her to my very good friend and very key network, Delroy Gill. Shout out to Delroy. And so, and Delroy was on a podcast, one of the first podcasts that I did, because he was like one of the motivators behind like helping me get this started and was like, go for it, make it happen. So Delroy was on, has been on one of the podcasts, and I really recommend that you go back and listen to his interview because he drops some real gems. And it was like really when we were just getting the podcast started. So it honestly doesn't even have nearly as many views as I think it should. But really, you should go back and listen to that. And maybe what I'll do, making another note for myself, is drop the link to Delroy's podcast as well. Just drop it in case someone wants to go back and listen to it. But he dropped some dope gems. So anyway, so Delroy and her meet. And now they have this whole thing going on with the Denver Gents, and like they're working on some branding stuff and some marketing stuff, and they're both fabulous marketers. So if you haven't seen like the Daily Boss Up or you haven't seen the Denver Gents, definitely go check those out. But their platform is like, both of their platforms are way larger than this platform. So like dope is dope is dope is dope, right? So they are now connected, and all of that came through networking, right? So then what ends up happening is I get a donation, a sizable donation from this sister because she's like, I love what you're doing. I want to support you. So think about all those different connections. Like my connection just to be getting there 2 years later, I have this really fabulous sister who I really relate to in other ways. Like there are so many aspects of just us being boss women in this field of mindset and motivation and business development and all of this. And so she's just such a key ally to have. She's just a key ear to lean in on and a shoulder to have. A girl he has to cry on sometime, all of that. But I mean, just all of those pieces. And then thinking about all the different people that we've been able to like be in connection with and how those different relationships have flourished and grown and all of that. So that's just one example. And notice I mentioned that it took, time, right? Like it's now 2020. I think I met her like mid 2018. So it's taken some time. And, and I could go back even further from like other networks that have taken more time to develop. So the other key about that is like your network is not going to just develop overnight. It's not going to do that. That's not even how it's designed to happen. So, it's this marathon that you're constantly in. And that's why, again, I mentioned it's like developing and then maintaining those relationships, because I have networks like Delroy, just using him as an example. I met Delroy now maybe like 4 years ago. And then the person who introduced me to him, I maybe met 6 years ago, and so it's this process by which you just meet this person to meet this person to meet this person to meet this person. And it becomes this web where before you know it, if you're intentional about networking, it becomes this web of resources and contacts. And we've all heard, or I think you've heard of like the 6 degrees of separation. It's like you can get to anybody in the world by 6 degrees of separation. And so the more vast your network is, it's really like the more access to the globe that you have, right? And so people are not intentional. And in particular, again, I'm gonna drive home, our community, the Black community, is not intentional about networking. It is not coming to some happy hour and passing out your cards and asking people what they can do for you, or thinking about making a sale. And if that's how you think about networking, I can just assure you, you're just doing it all wrong. You're doing it wrong. So you want to begin to create this web that just branches out and branches out and branches out. And then you find these interconnected pieces, right? And so what ends up happening is like now you find that you know someone who knows this person, and you also know this person, and then that person also knows this person. And then it strengthens that relationship. It's like it begins to add these multi-layered cords that become harder and harder to break, because it's so connected to, one person to the next person. So networking can really help you like meet the right person. It can help you make key introductions. It can help you build skills. It can help you with mentorship. It can help you with key partnerships. It can help you build your clientele. It can help keep you updated in the latest trends and news and industries. And it can just open up doors. It can open up doors. I don't know if you listen to when I go live. If you do, I recently talked about how I got this adjunct position. So I'm not going to go through the whole story, but basically this adjunct position came to me virtually like that. I didn't even have to work for it. Seriously. I needed an adjunct position. I had some changes happening in my personal life and my family life, and I needed to pick up on some additional income really quickly. And I said, well, I have a master's degree. I'll just go and teach. I need an adjunct position. The business department is normally a pretty competitive department because a lot of people have gotten business degrees. And so teaching in the business field can be really, really competitive. I know, because I've tried multiple times at other junctures in my life to get adjunct positions in the business industry, and I haven't always been able to. So the last time that I did teach as an adjunct, I taught at a school for energy and technology, and then they had me teaching like general ed. They had me doing some bullshit that I didn't know. Seriously, they had me teaching like a CAD course. Okay, do you know what a CAD course is? Okay, I didn't either till I was teaching it 1 week at a time, which is a disservice to the students. And it's also a disservice to me as a teacher. It was like, it just wasn't, I didn't feel good showing up. I don't feel good not knowing what I'm talking about. I'm not a CAD person. I don't do architecture and graphic design. And it was just ridiculous to me for me to be teaching that when it wasn't in my field, right? So getting a teaching position in my field had been difficult until now, because my network is a lot more advanced. And so I literally put out a call in December, or I think I put out maybe in November. And I was like, hey guys, to all my higher ed contacts. And I was like, I need an adjunct position. I literally sent my resume, my transcripts, sent that out. I sent it out to a few folks. I get a call back from a business department at a community college. And the guy is like, hey, your resume came across my desk. I'm interested in talking to you. Let me do an interview with you in January, and I can probably get you teaching by the fall. So again, mind you, I went and searched for an adjunct position because I needed one right away. And I'm thinking like the fall, I can't wait till the fall, but that's okay. So I'm like, cool, thank you for that opportunity. And I'd love to meet with you in January. I'll do your interview. And, if you can get me teaching any earlier than that, that would be great. If not, look forward to maybe working with you in the fall. So of course, I'm moving on. I'm doing my thing. I'm still talking to all of my people in higher ed. I'm like, hey guys, what's up? Need to know something. Help us out. And I get a call back. And the guy is like, listen, I'm gonna make an executive decision. I'm gonna hire you. And can you start in February? What? So now it's official. I'm teaching at this school. I will be starting my class this upcoming month, right? In the business department. So I'm teaching business, which is what I need to be teaching and want to be teaching. So, but that literally happened through my network. So I just want, when we talk about like opportunities, partnerships, meeting the right people, opening the right doors, it's not nuanced. It's so real. And if you don't understand, and I mean, I could literally tell you stories for days. I'm actually just going to jump right into these strategies, but I just want to explain how important it is. And it's not like it just happens for me. It happens for anyone who has developed a strong network. And so if that's not you, you need to make that you. All right, so let me get on in here. Let me jump into these strategies and let's wrap up this episode. By the way, you guys, make sure that you share, like this episode, share this information out, make sure that you're subscribed. If you're catching me over at YouTube, what is up? Because this is the Boss Up with BBI podcast, and we are here talking about all things money and mindset in the Black community. And I can assure you, your network is a direct tie into your money and your mindset. So let's talk about these key strategies. So first of all, key strategy number one is to have a strategy. That means know what you're networking for. Okay. So I don't go anywhere. Now, young networkers, I get it. It's kind of in a frenzy, but I'll be honest, like if you really want to leapfrog and just jump way advanced, like don't go in there without a strategy. Know what you're networking for. So that means you need to have an idea as to what is the key person, thing, industry, skill, door that you were looking to be opened, okay? You need to walk in with that purpose because first of all, energy attracts energy. When you walk in and you know what you're looking for, those pieces or people, places, organizations are going to start to jump out at you because you're looking for something specific, right? If you're just out here kind of scanning, you don't really know what you're looking for, what you need might walk right on past you. You have to be intentional about this. Intentional living, y'all already know how I do. Intentional living. So first strategy is have a strategy, okay? Second, well, we're going to call this 1A. This is a bonus, okay? Build a network before you need it. So what I mean by that is, let me use the adjunct position as an example. Build a network before you need it. So start now. And if you've been going to networking things and you haven't gone in with a strategy, start now. Build it before you need it. Because the reality is that had I needed an adjunct position and I didn't have that network and I really needed that, I would have been at the whim of applying to these various different places. And I would have just probably had some of the same type of results. Or I could have, maybe found something, but I would have probably had to go through a whole lot of interviewing and I would have had to beat out a bunch of other people and stuff that I didn't have to do in this go round based off of, what happened, right? So my point is that you can't build the network when you need it because the relationship isn't there, right? So I was able to put out that call because all the people who I have connections to in higher ed, they know me. They know what I do in the education space. They know what I do in the homeschool space. They know what I do in the business space. They know what I do in the community space. They have seen me show up. They have seen my work. They have heard me speak. They know me. So when I call them, they're not putting their own credibility and reputation on the line because they know I'm solid. you have to get to know someone, let them know that you're solid before they're willing to make those, types of leaps and bounds for you. So you can't build the network when you need it. You have to build it now. Okay, so that was kind of like 1A. That was the bonus. All right. Strategy number 2, get involved. Find a few key organizations that you can get involved with. My first big organization here in Colorado was Shop Talk Live. I was a really, really active member of Shop Talk Live for like 4 years. I've been a kind of, on the sideline member of Shop Talk Live. That's my crew. They rocks with me hard. I rocks with them hard. But I have not been like as participatory as I had been. But for like 4 strong years, like I was rocking with Shop Talk Live. And so again, that's like one of the organizations. I also worked really heavily with the Urban League Young Professionals. Like I'm in that group. So there's a couple of, key organizations and key groups that you need to be a part of. And that depends on what your industry is or what your goals are or whatever. I'm not going to tell you what types of organizations, but get involved in some organizations. That could even just be like groups at church, groups at your school, groups at your job. Get involved in at least like 2 organizations that you can really like dig in deep, where people know your name, they expect for you to show up, things like that, because that's the start of where people get to know and see you, and they can help branch you out from there. You can do more than that, but that's going to be a good key way to get started is 1 or 2 solid, I'm just going to say 2 solid organizations that you can consistently participate in and show up in. Okay, so key strategy number 3 is to develop a means of following up. So this is my method that I use. Okay, I have a right hand and a left hand method. So when I meet people, again, I come with a strategy so I know who it is that I'm looking for, what type of people that I'm looking for, and those key contacts go in my right hand. So when I am meeting with people, maybe they go on the right side of my purse, the right side of my folder. If you ever meet me in person, I wear jeans most of the time. Like they might go in my right pocket, but they're going to go somewhere on the right, in my right coat pocket, whatever. But they're going to go on the right. Those are the ones who I'm going to immediately follow up with. Those are the ones who I'm really interested in connecting with and talking to and expanding and growing my network, because intentionally I came in with a strategy to meet them or meet someone like them. So those are my right hands. Everyone else goes in the left hand. Now, you could possibly, like, I might not have known I even came in to meet you. Maybe for some reason, like you really struck something with me and I'm like, oh, they're going to move from the left hand to the right hand. I'll stick them in my right side because I want to immediately follow up with them. But for 95% of the people who I know I did not come in there to meet, they get put on the left hand side. And what I generally do at that point is I send them a template email. So yes, you may be someone who's gotten a template email from me. I'm okay with that. And you should be okay with that, because the reality is that, I don't know what you do, but in my field in my line of work and my activism in the community and how much I'm out on the ground, I just meet a lot of people. And I don't have that type of time. And I'm okay with that, because oftentimes people don't have a purpose to meet up with me, right? So again, strategy. I might not be a person you absolutely need to meet. It doesn't mean that we didn't meet. It doesn't mean that somewhere down the line. But then there are other touch points. So social media is a great follow-up touch point. So that's my point 4. Everyone doesn't get coffee. So my key strategy number 4 is everyone doesn't get coffee. Every time you meet someone doesn't result in a coffee meeting or a lunch or a breakfast or whatever. It doesn't result in that. You can follow up through email. You can send them an email on some helpful information. If we sat down and talked and you told me, that you were really interested in such and such and such and such from the education field, I very well may send you this email that's talking about how these standards over here aren't meeting, the criteria to whatever. I mean, as we talk and I'm listening, we might not be a key contact, but I can stay in touch with you by remembering, like, oh, you know what, that person was in this industry or that field, or here's an event that I'm not going to go to, but it could benefit that person to go to it. So let me just forward this event over to them. It'll be a quick note. Hey, bruh, hey, girlfriend, thought this may interest you, whatever, right? So you send that off. That's a perfect way to keep up and just start developing a light relationship with someone when there's no real need per se, the immediate need per se for you to know them, right? Okay, so the second one is like social media interaction, right? So I'm gonna follow you, you can follow me. I have content that you can interact with. I'll interact with your content. I'll like somebody's stuff all day. Like there are times that I'm literally just like scrolling and I'm just like, I like that, I like that. That's what's up. That's dope. Heart, like, thumbs up, laughy face, whatever, right? So I might take me a little break to do that because that's a way that we're interacting. So now you see that I've liked your stuff. You've seen that I loved your stuff. I might have a comment. I might have a, laughy face or whatever, laughy emoji, whatever. You will begin to see that. And that's, again, another way that we can interact. And then you might see them again. So again, if you're like in some of those same groups over and over again, you might see them again. If you're being consistent about your networking and intentional about your networking, they may end up showing up again. So when you see them, it's like, hey, good to see you again. Again, you don't have to have no long conversation. You don't have to do any of that, but just acknowledge like, hey, yes, good to see you. That's what's up. So those are some things. Everyone does not get coffee, right? My right-handers, the ones that are key, those are the ones that I'm trying to set up like a meeting for, a call for, a coffee meeting for, something like that, because I want to get FaceTime and I want to get in there and I've got a purpose, right? I've got a purpose for why we're going to develop, even if that's just like, I think you're someone who I really should know. And I want to build this relationship. I don't know when I'm going to need something. I don't know when you're going to need something from me. But those types of relationships. So the last one, my last strategy, is have a CRM. That is a customer relationship manager. There are a ton of them, like Trello can be one. You have Salesforce, you have HubSpot. You can use your own Gmail account. Gmail has this app extension that attaches to it. I don't know why I can't remember the name right now, but acts as a CRM. Like you can turn your Gmail account into a CRM. And so I don't know if you have other accounts besides Gmail. I'm sure you can do the same thing. But you need a customer relationship manager. And so basically you just take notes in that until the relationship is built. So like if I emailed you or we had a conversation, I'm putting your information into my CRM. I'm just going to add a quick little note. If I can remember anything, sometimes it might just be like what event I was at, because there was nothing memorable about the experience of meeting you. Again, sorry, not sorry. That's just the reality of it. But take some notes or whatever until there's like a solid relationship built. There are times now at some point with some people, like there's a lot of people I don't need to take notes on, like we're good, we're in there. But as we're building that relationship, I like to take notes on that. And then if there are like projects and stuff like that that we're doing together, or ideas of things that I think that I could potentially approach them about later on, like I will make a note of those things. So I just want to recap as we close out that you want to have a strategy. Your bonus one is that you want to build a network before you need it. Number 2 is you want to get involved. So find a couple of key strategies. Number 3 is you want to develop a means of following up. So you want to categorize them and then have like a really solid follow-up email template. You can look those up. There is a bunch of them. Find one that fits you and like your speaking style. Then remember that everyone does not get coffee. So that's number 4. 4 is everyone does not get coffee. So other ways that you can follow up with people, like email, social media, when you see them again, things like that. And then the last one, number 5, is have a customer relationship manager or a CRM, and use that in order for you to take notes until you've really developed a strong relationship with somebody. So as we wrap up, guys, I hope that this was helpful and insightful. I really feel like this is a weak point in our community. We do not spend enough time really building strong networks. And as I said when I started, this is a global world. This is a global society at this point. And so, having those local connections is just as important as having national connections, is just as important as having international connections. When I go to Detroit, I am constantly building out my network physically in Detroit. I want to know people. I want to see them. I want to say what's up. I want to know that I can call on folks. I want to know that I can get additional introductions. When I get to Atlanta, I'm building. When I get to Houston, I'm building. I haven't lived in Oakland for like 18 years. When I go back home, I'm building, right? So it's this constant process of building and getting to know people. And I have been expanding into other places. I started reaching out to some people in Omaha. I started reaching out to some people in Nevada. So it's this constant process of like, how far can I reach, right? And then now I have also started working on some contacts over in Ghana. So it's like, how do we continue to build out so that we can operate from a place of leverage? And we can do that when we have strong networks with each other, and we have strong networks to other assets and other resources that we need. So, with that, I am going to wrap up this episode again, just saying thank you to our sponsor, which is the Mastermind, Mentor Me Mastermind with the Black Business Initiative. And so, very excited to continue to roll out information about that. And before you go, guys, if you want to check me out, I am live on Tuesdays and Thursdays on our CT and Media Network. So if you are already on YouTube, make sure that you like and subscribe and share. If you are over on Anchor or Spotify or one of the other podcast platforms, you can come over onto the YouTube platform. You can like and subscribe and share from there. And then also, in the links in the description, I do have my podcast. So I am launching out, not a podcast, my own channel for Grind with Jice. So I am launching that out. Make sure you check that out. And for a very limited time, if you are not already in my Grind with Jice Facebook group, you can get in there. So again, I'll drop the link to that. Normally, it only has my clients, but I opened it up so that it can include some other folks in there. And maybe you'll become a client later on, but if you're not, that's no worries. Once you're in the group, you're always in the group, and we're in there keeping each other accountable. We're in there talking about intentional living. We're in there talking about productivity. We're in there talking about motherhood and parenting and parentpreneuring. So those are all the things that we got going on in Grind with Jice. You can join me over on Patreon, where I do a monthly group coaching session through Patreon. So that's a little bit more targeted. And then the Facebook group just kind of supports that. But you do not have to be a member of Patreon to be in the Facebook group, because I just opened it up. So we have all of that going on. I'm super excited, you guys, for everything that's going on this month and this week. I'm going to be in Detroit in February. Yes, I is. I'm going to be out there in Detroit. So catch me out there. We're going to be talking about the game of real life. And so I'm bringing that game out to Detroit. All right, y'all, that is it. This is another episode of Boss Up with BBI. You will catch me next week, where we are talking about all things money and mindset in the Black community. Peace.